Hello, welcome back to BLENDERSUSHI Live Noding. In this episode, we're gonna take a look at Sverchok Add-on and how it allows users to be able to look at the components of mesh data. So it's an area that's kind of probably a little bit scary if you are like a beginners to Sverchok Add-on, because suddenly you have access to all these components of the mesh data, and normally you don't have to look at that, and you just kind of maybe you go to edit mode and then you kind of move the vertices and then or maybe scale the edges or scale the polygon face. But with Sverchok, you can look at all of those as numbers, and that might be scary, but yeah. uh, but I'll show you anyway. That's It's actually not that scary, and it's actually very powerful. Let's jump into Sverchok right away. For example, I'll delete the lamp and the camera first, and we have this the default box or 3D cube in Blender, and I'll create a new Sverchok node 3, and I will use the objects in node, and this guy can get the cube, right? And the next thing you can do, if you want to look at the components of this guy, you can use the viewer index. Now, the viewer index allows you to look at the index of every component. When I'm saying components, that means the mesh data, which is if you have like this box selected and you go to edit modes by hitting tab, you know that you can access the vertices and edges and etc. That's the basic knowledge. But inside Sverchok, you can also sort of do that, but differently. So if I plug in the vertices, for example, and you can see right away like a bunch of numbers. What are those? They're the components of they're the index of every vertices that's this box currently have. So that's actually the first index, and that's the second one, and the next one, and we know that the total should be 8 vertices, but we have number 7 as the highest number. So that's how we can kind of look and zoom into the mesh data component of an object. It's a little bit like if you look at like a piece of music, it's made of like you can break down a piece of music into multiple stream, and then inside the multiple stream you can kind of scope and zoom into each and every notes, and you kind of can tell the durations of every note. That's kind of thing that similarly you can do using Sverchok. And so the next thing you can do, you can also scope this using something called text out. So the text out, you have a lot. Actually, I'll probably create a bunch of nodes that allow you to see the inside of components. So for example, so we know that we can look at the viewer index, and then we can also, if you want, we can also see the index of the polygon face, for example. If we turn that on and turn off the vertices, you can see that's the index number of polygon. We know that a box have 6 polygon, and that's how they look like, the index, just the index. But the actual data, if you want to see the actual data, you can look at it using a bunch of nodes. For example, I think the best way to look at it is using the viewer text, but often I use the stethoscope node. That's actually kind of work as well. So I'll use the viewer text first. If I plug the vertices and then click view, and then I kind of make another node 3 here so we can look at the list. This is the Sverchok viewer. This is actually, when you hit view, this also creates a text, and inside the text you can actually see the components of the details of the vertices data, and that's how it looks like using Sverchok format. This is the first indices, and then the second one, and so on and so on and so on. That's the Sverchok viewer. If I made a little bit of changes, for example, to one of the vertices, if I go to vertices mode and turn on auto update here, maybe I move one. It's not updating because I think I need to also run the playback. But you can see as soon as I updated that single vertices, the number actually changes here. So that's how you can look at into the component. Okay, and you can also do it another way. Is if you're using stethoscope. It's kind of similar. I'll pipe in the same data, the vertices data, into the stethoscope MK2, and you can see the vertices data being listed here. Sometimes you also wanted to view by element, and that's kind of nice. It gives you a quick access to the element. But in this case, let's see, it's supposed to be like, I'm expecting it to give me the one of the indices. Actually, you can do that by using list item. Yeah, I think that's a better way to look at it. This is like a bunch of vertices. We know that we have 8 vertices, and then this is listing each and every item of the element. You just to ensure that you are looking at the right thing by switching this level. So this is actually a nice thing to actually talk about Sverchok ability to zoom into the component. So this is level 1. You can see level 1 we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 components, and we can zoom into it, and we can see one of the vertices. We can access any of these, and you can even zoom in even closer. But at this point also, you know that this is the XYZ position of the vertices. You can also access those components by using this another list item node. So you can see that's the first one, which is the X component, and then Y, and then the Z. If that's a little bit complicated, let's go back in the level. So that's a kind of a little bit clearer. So at least this is like the first zoom level, all the components, and then so you zoom in and look at one level, and then you zoom in further. You look at the first of every component of the vertices, which is the X position. Okay, that's if you are using the stethoscope node. With the viewer text, you can also look at it, look at the edges component, for example, and then also the polygon components. Either actually, this only display either the edges or the polygon, so be careful with that. With the edges, you look at it. This is the edges, the first indices. This is they are the indices of the edges, and you can see that this is how Blender kind of laid out the data. So this is the first edges. It's connecting the vertices 0 and vertices 1, so it's become an edges, and then also connecting 0, 3, 0, 4. You can actually in Sverchok kind of write down all of this manually as you please. For example, if you want to connect, if you want to add into this data and you want to add another edges into this data, you can do that quite easily. Although not in this case, this is only like the preview, like only view. You can also look at the polygon data, and this is the polygon indices. We have 6 of them, and this is how the face is kind of being connected together. And So 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's the directions of the face. Also important to create a polygon and then to make sure you get the normal correctly. Yeah, so you can scope the data, you can kind of zoom into it. So what else can you do here? There's one more thing I want to show you. Actually, this is kind of important. I'll delete everything. Start with another default cube. There's something called Mesh Eval node in Sverchok. This one, Mesh Eval node. I'll create this guy, and this guy is kind of interesting. I'm not sure if this is still like a beta kind of node, like a prototype kind of node, maybe even alpha kind of node. Maybe this is also like experimental kind of node. But this guy allows you to kind of, let's say you have this guy selected, and you click this guy, and then suddenly it generates this Mesh Eval node, and suddenly you have this new text, and this text has a bunch of data in JSON format, and I'll just turn this on so we can see some color. So this data looks like this. You can see, okay, this is the vertices data. You can kind of guess, okay, there's a lot of these bracket kind of things. They're actually there to help you kind of separate piece of data. So it's actually there to help you, even though it's kind of scary at first. But you look at it, and then you can kind of tell they are separated by comma and separated by bracket and another comma. You can tell this is vertices number index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 8 vertices, and you have this face data, and then you have this ages data. Okay, and that's actually very, very interesting, because if you use these nodes properly, currently what's going on, if you kind of scrub, or I think if you use viewer draw, and then okay, suddenly there's something disappear from here. You try to plug this in, and nothing seems to work. There is nothing being viewed. So what's going on? So unfortunately, I think at this point, MeshEvalNode only works if you give some variables. If you put some variables into this guy, into one of this data. This data is actually can be like a live data that Sverchok can understand if you put a like variable. For example, this for vertices index 0, this is this guy, the first vertices of this guy. If we replace this with a like a variable, like I'll just type in blah and then update it, suddenly we have kind of like a ghosted image that's based on this original default cube. And if I'm not wrong, if I disconnect this, so this node update itself, now we have this blah. This is the like suddenly we have the parameters to play with. If I just plug in like a float value into this guy and this to look at the data again, suddenly we have control over the vertices of this guy. So that's kind of nice, right? We are actually controlling the vertices, but only like in the z-axis. In the z-axis of this guy, maybe we want to control it in the more like in the x-axis. So I'll make a little bit of changes here. Blah, there, and this one can go back to minus 1.0. Update it. Now suddenly we can control that 1 bits there. And if you want to control this guy, I don't know what this guy is. I think that's the second indices. Let's look at it using the viewer index. Yep, that's actually not the second one. That's actually that's 0, 1, 2. That's number. That's 0. if I put the blur into this guy, that's kind of moving that guy up there. I know that this used to be minus 1.0, so I want actually this indices 2. Suddenly we have control over this guy. I think that's kind of, that is actually really powerful. And we know that in Sverchok you can easily generate instances by using the matrices, and let's reroute this, actually rewire x to the y. Okay, now we have a bunch of instances, but why did I do that, you might ask? Because this parameter that we have right here, we can actually randomize. We can use random number, plug into this guy, give it like the value 6, and then suddenly we have control over all of this, and we can randomize it. Let's get rid of this viewer index and look at the result. So this is the original box, which data we kind of source the data into Mesh Eval, and suddenly we can generate all of this based on this cube data. Let's make 10 of them and randomize it. And if you like, you can bake it, and you have real objects like that. Very cool, right? And if you actually, there's another thing that I want to mention. With viewer bmesh, if you plug in this Mesh Eval and plug a floating number into this guy, you have a real object right there. But this is a new object. If you look at it, this object is called alpha 0. This is the original cube, still doesn't change, but you can select this guy, the original cube, and then kind of go into the mesh data and kind of switch into alpha 0, and suddenly you are modifying the original cube. So that way this kind of behave like a modifier. With a modifier you can easily turn something into something like another different mesh, but you can always go back to the original. You can do the same thing with this. If you keep the original cube data, so I think that's the original cube data, you can force Blender to keep that data. So yeah, that's actually a quick look at the components of like the component levels of mesh data and how you can manipulate it inside Sverchok. It's can be slightly confusing, but you know that I've done this a couple of times, like randomize input vertices. That's actually like a quick way if you want to randomize the vertices of an object. That's actually the same idea. You can basically like list an item of the components. You can actually there is actually one node that's kind of decompose the data. For example, this vertices, you just go in there and then kind of you can decompose this into each components, and then you modify whatever components there, and then you just list join it back, and you get a suddenly you can control each one of them. But usually you don't want to list the compose anyway. You want to kind of maybe you want to just move the vertices or something, like depending on the index. So before I go too far, I guess I should stop right here and then let it settle. Let all this lots of theories, let it settle with you first, and maybe in the next live noding I'll go back to the components and then kind of make another example to clear up all this complex inside components thing. Well, yep, that's I guess pretty much it for this live noding. If you have any comments, feedbacks, any question, just let me know in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.